All right, here we are again, Marco. How are you?
Here we are. Cheers.
Yes. Cheers to my water. Okay, so you're in a much nicer place than I am. I can see from your background, and you did tell me that
It's
you're in
not a
Portugal
virtual
right
background.
now.
Yes,
Right,
no,
it's
it's a
real.
live one. It is real. Yeah, we were
So
just on.
very appropriate that you were there for this discussion because we are talking about the travel updates for going. So
Yeah,
give us the 411. What's going on? How was your
sure.
experience getting there?
And I, first of all, thank you for having me once again. And yes, I am in beautiful Porto, in Portugal. I landed about 2 days ago, and I figured I was going to have this webinar with Angela. She's going to ask me all these million questions. I got to go there and experience it so I can talk about it firsthand. And so here I am, just
And
for
we
you
said thanks
and the
for
audience,
taking
right?
one for the
Right?
team,
That's it.
Marco.
That's it. So, and I am at the hotel lobby here, so I do apologize if you see your background, um, but yeah, everything here is doing well. I would say doing really well. So, the big thing that I want to start with is, as of yesterday, Portugal had 76.5% vaccinated population. So 76.5% of the population
great,
is
right?
vaccinated. I think they're number 2 to United Arab Emirates as far as the total. So this is not first dose. This is fully vaccinated people in the whole country.
Wow.
So right now in the world, they're number 2. I think the US is still about 54 point something percent at the last stats I saw. So it's a huge, huge gap there. First doses, which is obviously all very important as well, is 85%. So there is a bit of sense of security here. People vaccinated now. That doesn't mean that everybody wears masks. So that's still the procedures. All public spaces, you're wearing the mask. You know, you're walking to the metro, you're wearing it. At the airport, you're wearing the mask. Inside most buildings, I had a few meetings earlier today, and we'll have, and all of us are wearing masks. So that is still the common thing you see everywhere. There are obviously some exceptions here and there, but for the most part, the population is still masked up, which is great. The other thing I will tell you about the process of getting here, which I think your listeners want to hear about. So this time I actually flew via Amsterdam, so I didn't fly directly to Lisbon. So
okay. And which airline?
I flew on Delta. Okay. So we just got a really good deal on Delta, and I flew from Boston to Amsterdam directly to Porto. Now, and the procedures are similar depending on which airline you go to, but it was a little bit unique because it's the first time during the pandemic I'm actually connecting and transferring. But I will say it was pretty easy and very self-explanatory. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when you're booking a flight and you have a flight confirmation, you will be getting a link from the airline to register for your airline passenger locator, which is basically a contact tracer. So that's what we did. We got a link from Delta for 2 countries, for Amsterdam, for Holland, and also for Portugal. So that is given to you when you book it, and then you can also go on the website of the airline and get it as well. It's go ahead. You have a question?
Is that related to that app that's in Europe?
No,
no. So it's
the
different.
EU digital app. Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. No, this has nothing to do with that. So basically, this is a form online that asks you to put together your contact information, where you're staying, when you're traveling to, and then traveling back. So if you think back a few months ago, at least on the East Coast, anywhere we would go, we have to give our phone number. That was a contact tracer, right? So that they would know that you were there at this establishment. They would contact you if somebody was infected. So that's the same thing they're doing, is they're giving you the opportunity to, or asking you to give you your contact information, where you're staying, your phone number, all in case that there is a contact and somebody who is infected at the airport or at the on the flight, so they can contact you. It's a very basic form. You fill it out. On the flight to from Amsterdam to Porto, they actually collect that the form before you land in Porto, so that the airline actually collects it from other passengers.
Okay, so it's an actual paper form.
Yeah. Now, I will say this, because I have this question all the time. a lot of clients will actually fill it out online, just, on their phone or on their computer, and they won't print it
Oh.
out. So the person sitting next to me actually had filled it out online. So they didn't physically give them the paper. They just said, I filled that out online, and they were fine with it. They said, I think it's just,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know what fail safe. I mean, obviously, if you could just kind of fib, right, and not say that you had and when you didn't, but most people had their paper version, and then there were a few people here and there that said they filled it out online and they didn't give them the paper version.
Okay.
And that was the extent of it. That was, of course, I had to take a test. So that still
Before
applies.
you, so
Yeah.
before
So
you got on
before
the
I
plane.
boarded
Okay.
my Amsterdam flight from Boston, so I flew out on Saturday, and I took my test on Thursday morning, and my
Mhm.
results came in Friday middle afternoon. And so you still have to take a test. I am fully vaccinated. And then you have to show that test at the Delta counter when you check in.
Mhm.
And then also I had to show the test in Holland when I transferred from at Amsterdam airport from the international flight to the regional flight in Porto.
Now with Delta, when you went on the website, did they tell you specifically which tests they accept?
Yeah, they do. They do
Okay.
tell you it's a PCR test. Most of them will be PCR
Okay.
tests. I think in the beginning, I think we talked about a month ago, there was a bigger difference between what the country required and what other airlines did. There was a huge gap. Some were going antigen, others were PCR.
Mhm.
They've now been a little bit more aligned. So if you go to Delta or BA or Lufthansa, most of them will
Okay.
actually say PCR, because they know that it makes it easy for everybody
Okay.
to actually get it. Yeah?
So we have our first question online, and
Shoot.
it comes from, oops, I lost the screen. From Grace Moreira Belucio. So what if I'm traveling to multiple locations? So kind of like how you did, right? So you went through Amsterdam.
Yep.
But then we got this question last time too, which is like, so what if they fly into Lisbon and then they're going to stay there a couple of days, and then they're going to go to the Azores or Madeira or something like that? So
Yeah.
what would be that
So
process?
anytime, yeah. So it's a great question, and it does depend what those multiple locations are. So to your point, Angela, if you're flying from Lisbon to Madeira, the Azores, you will need to test. So if you're going via Lisbon to the Azores, you will obviously be tested in Lisbon. So that test, before you arrive in Lisbon, so that test will suffice to go to the Azores. But if you're spending 3 days or 4 days in Lisbon, then you have to get retested to get to the Azores. The same thing to Madeira. Okay. Now, if for some reason you're flying to the Azores first, and of course you'll need a test to get to the Azores from the US, and then you decide to come to Lisbon, you do not need to get tested.
Okay.
Makes sense? So if you're flying into the islands, yes, you do need to get tested, unless you're doing it as I did, a connection same day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're spending some time in the mainland and then going to the Azores and Madeira, then you'll need to get tested. Returning back from the Azores, Madeira, Lisbon, any European country, you will always need to get tested before you fly back to the United States. When I leave in a couple of weeks, I will need to have my negative COVID test and my nose raped by, basically, to
Right.
because the tests here are a little bit more strenuous than they are. I know you've experienced it yourself when you're, yeah.
Yeah. So in the news this past week, it was that the EU, a lot of EU countries have now restricted US travel again, but Portugal is the exception, right? So
Yeah,
can you
well,
talk a little bit about that?
Of course, yeah. Portugal is not the only exception. I think there's actually more countries not following the EU guidelines, and there are countries that are.
Okay.
So publicly, I can tell you Italy, Spain, France, UK, and I think Germany. So Germany is an exception. Germany, as of today, it may change. Germany is only allowing vaccinated passengers from the US. So they're not allowing anybody to go to Germany with a negative COVID test unless you've been vaccinated. So they're the exception to the rule. Other than that, I would say Holland is also a place. So I flew via Amsterdam as of September 4th, which is the day that I actually flew out. They were requiring people to be vaccinated and take a test to fly out there. So most Western countries, if you look at the map of Europe, in Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, everything is status quo. There's been really no changes. Everybody was really concerned, including us, from a business standpoint, obviously, when the EU came out with it. But we had been discussing that with the tourism board and with our contacts here in Portugal. And the idea was that even though the guidelines were in place, and let's face it, a lot of that news came about why? Because the US is still, as we know, is still not allowing Europeans in, right? So unfortunately, this is not just about COVID. This is also a bit of a political game back and forth. And as we've seen, there is a spike in the US. That is the reality, unfortunately, that we're seeing with COVID. So European countries want to protect themselves. Now, countries like the US, Spain, which is also about 70% fully vaccinated, France, which is getting up there as well, they feel like they're at that point where they feel safer because of their own vaccination rates, that they do not need to make further restrictions to travel to the US.
So for the countries that you said, I think you said Holland, like you have to show your vaccination. Yeah. So is it a physical card?
It's a physical card. Yep.
Okay. So whatever you were given when you got vaccinated, hold on to that. You have to show it. What about a copy?
A copy of it. I would have a physical copy of it. Don't rely on the electronic, because not because they won't accept it, but let's say your phone dies. Let's say you have a battery and you're in line. You know, it's the same thing we tell people with airline tickets. It's great to have the app. It's great to be electronic, but we all know things can happen. The computer systems can go down. Always have a hard copy with you just in case.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We've gotten a lot of questions about the app, the
digital certificate.
Yes.
Yep.
Because there are people that are citizens. They live here in the States, but they are citizens. So can they get it? Right. And so I think there's some confusion on that.
My parents live here. I asked my parents if I could get it, and it's kind of like the old Portuguese way. If you know someone, then maybe they can make it happen for you. But as a general rule, no. Unfortunately, you have to have residency in Portugal.
So you have to have an address in Portugal that is in their system as your residence. So
as a real life example, although I'm a Portuguese citizen, my address, my residence, my official residence is in the United States. So for me to change that, it's a process. I'm sure it could be done. I've heard of people doing it, but it's a timely one and not one that can be guaranteed. Okay. But let me kind of go back to the original question about the digital certificate. So that's confusing a lot of people, because if you go on the websites, a lot of airline websites, TAP has this on their website. I see it all the time. Even Delta and Lufthansa and so forth. It will specifically say EU digital certificate. And the reason we do not, we meaning anybody from the United States, will not have a EU digital certificate because we are Americans, we're not Europeans. That is posted on there for people that are flying from European countries to Portugal. Thus, I know we get questions all the time from customers saying, I don't have a EU digital certificate, can I travel? The answer is yes, you can travel, because you are coming from the United States, where there is no access to that EU certificate form that is shared across the EU European countries. So as we mentioned, bring your physical CDC card. I will tell you, when I checked in here in Porto, they asked me for my vaccination card. And I think we talked about it last time.
When you checked in the hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
So last time, I believe we talked about how they were checking or monitoring people who, when they check in, to make sure that they are fully vaccinated. And that happened to me. I showed them my CDC card. That's the only one I have. I actually have a copy of it. I showed it to them and they checked me in, no problem.
Okay. And then if you don't have that, will they make you do the rapid test?
Exactly, because that's happened. We've had clients, even here in Porto, different hotels, where they do not recognize the CDC for whatever reason. And they, let's face it, it's its own country. They don't have to recognize the CDC. So most hotels understand, because of business reasons, and they understand Americans that don't have the digital certificate, they will accept it. But there are a few here and there that they will not, and they usually will have a test you can buy for €2, and you can take a self-test there and just present the results, and you're all set. In the event you need to go, if they don't have a test available, you can get them at a pharmacy as well down the street for the same 2-3
Right.
euros a test.
Now, I know that you can buy them here at a pharmacy like Walgreens. Can you take it with you? And
I would
no?
not. No,
Okay.
because we can't guarantee that it's under the same regulation. Just
Right.
like, if I don't think this is the case anybody in the US, but if you had the Sputnik vaccine, hopefully not, nobody has a Sputnik vaccine, or any of the other vaccines that are not the most common ones, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the AstraZeneca, and the Johnson & Johnson. If you're flying anywhere in the EU, they will not recognize any other vaccine but those. Same thing with the self-tests. So
Got
you
it.
need to make sure you have, if you don't have the CDC card, if you need to get tested, just purchase a test here. Just spend the extra couple of euros. It's well worth it that way. There's
Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right. So we have another question, and it's actually one that we've had in previous sessions, but I think it's always important to repeat information. Sure. Because things could change, right? So this is from Scott Herbst. When I make it to Portugal and I'm getting ready to fly back to the US, what happens if I test positive for COVID? I'm guessing there is some waiting period before I could fly home. How hard would it be for me then, having a positive test, to find accommodations to make it through the waiting period? Would I be allowed to stay at a hotel or Airbnb?
Yeah, great question. So obviously there have been cases where that has happened. We actually had a false test. We had a customer who had a false positive test and then tested negative, but he had to wait a couple of days at the same hotel he checked out of earlier before the flight. So most hotels in Lisbon actually will have dedicated rooms, quarantine rooms, so to speak, that are geared towards those cases. Of course, unfortunately, at this time, it is at the customer's expense. You will have to pay the extra cost to stay there, and then you'll hopefully get retested. On the 6th or 7th day to see if you are negative, and if you show 2 consecutive negative tests, then you are clear to fly.
Now, are you dealing just with the hotel on this, or where are you having to report your test and all that?
No, just the hotel. I mean, because if you're testing positive, if you show up at the airport with a positive result, they're going to have you sent back anyway to the hotel. They'll just tell you can't board. So obviously, hopefully this is not the case, but if you are feeling ill and you feel like you need to go to a doctor, that's different, right? You will have to get checked in and everything else. But if you're just got, like our customer who tested had a false positive test, he was sent back to the hotel, had to stay there a couple more days, and then checked. He had 2 consecutive negative tests, and then he was able to fly out.
Got it.
But that's the common question.
Yeah. And are they still doing testing at the airport?
They are, but I don't recommend. I think we talked about this too. Lisbon Airport, unfortunately, is it's not on the normal non-COVID situation. It's never the most smooth sailing because it's just a lot of people congregating around a small area. If you recall, the waiting area before the gates kind of go out, there's a lot of people there. So the testing centers is obviously outside before you check in, but it's also a very small, narrow area. And you will sort of want to avoid getting as much contact with other people's, within that area as possible. So I would recommend getting the test before you get to the airport. Obviously, last resort, do it there. Got
it. And so I've only been to the Lisbon airport, and their testing, so they had 2 testing centers. They had one in like the garage level, so at the bottom, that was the rapid test, but then they had one in like kind of the main airport area. That you would get the results in, I think, 24 hours or something like that. So it was a different kind of test. But in the Porto airport, you're saying that the testing center is outside the airport. Yeah, it's outside, and I wouldn't guarantee that that's going to, given the amount of cases here and the trending that the COVID situation is thankfully in a positive note. I don't know if they will keep those test centers open at the airport, especially at this Porto, which is a small airport. Got it. Okay. That's good to know also, right? Yeah. So because if someone's planning on just doing it there, they might not. And I would say, I think we talked this in the first session. If you're here, if you travel to Portugal and then you want to get it tested, go to I'm sorry, not CP, Cruz Vermelha. So the Red Cross.
you can go online and actually schedule your test. Most of them are drive-through test facilities. You just drive in. That was when I was here in March. That's exactly what we did. We drove in Lisbon, and it was 60 euros, I think, at the time. I'm not sure what the prices are now. It could be a little bit different, but it's well worth it to do it way before you get to the airport. That way you avoid the crowds, just show them the test, and you kind of go to your own space.
Okay. I'm sure someone will ask this, but you can't, the tests that you buy at the pharmacy, those don't count for flying, or do they? When you go, yeah.
No, because they're usually the rapid tests. I haven't seen any PCR tests yet. So yeah, I mean, I bought a few of those too, just to keep it at home in case that we need to get tested. But no, you do need to get a medical cleared PCR test, a lab test, to be able to fly.
Got it. And then talk a little bit about just kind of how things are going to a restaurant. Are there reduced hours? Is there curfews anymore? That kind of thing.
There's no curfews. I actually was just checking. I have to go to a restaurant to pay, for upcoming group, and they're open regular hours until 11 p.m. This restaurant is 11 p.m. And most of them are regular hours right now. All the shoppings are closing at between 11 and midnight, which is standard. There's still a little bit of limitations in some of the smaller retail stores. They'll have little signs saying limit 6 passengers, 5 passengers, depending on how big or small it is. I will say this. A lot of what we talk about is obviously based on rules and regulations, but a lot is common sense. And we see that here a lot. People, if I'm walking down the street and there's nobody around me, I'll have my mask around my chin because there's nobody around me. But the moment somebody comes close to me, I put my mask up, and everybody else does the same. There is situations where it's hard to avoid when you're on the metro. Obviously, you try to give yourself a little bit of space. There's also, I think a bit of common sense on the elevators going up and down. If it's full, people won't come in. They'll wait for the next elevator.
Right.
And as much as we talk about laws and regulations, sometimes we just have to have, common sense and just kind of avoid the most, obvious things.
Right. We have another question here. It's actually a good question. What is a PCR test called in Portugal? Because do they call it a PCR? Do they call it something else?
No, I think they use the same acronyms because everywhere else, so the whole world actually is divided into PCR and antigen tests. So I will say in Portuguese, antigen is antigénicos, and PCR is PCR, which is just the Portuguese translation. Okay. Not to be confused with any political party here in Portugal. Just
we have another question here. How about vaccine cards, which we already talked about a little bit, but this person, Jay Rocha, heard that the US CDC cards are not being accepted by some establishments. Have you come across that?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about, so there could be some hotels, for example, they will not accept it. You can't make somebody in a foreign country accept a CDC accredited card. I will say this, the worst thing, and that's to check into a hotel, right? The worst thing that you'll have to do is test a rapid test, and hopefully, if you just flew in. So here's the thing, if you just flew in, you still have your negative test from 72 hours, right? You can check in using that test.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
So
so go straight to the hotel, don't dilly-dally.
Don't go shopping, don't go to the club, just go right to the hotel. So I had a bigger layover. I had a 5-hour layover in Amsterdam. So I was not able to use the same test because by the time I actually landed in Porto and got to the hotel, my 72 hours were up.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Now, I could have tried and maybe they would have noticed, but I was just trying to be good. And, I just gave my CDC card. So.
Got it. I'm thinking the next time we do one of these, if you could bring the test that you buy at the pharmacy, just to show people, because for those of you who haven't done one, like we went to Walgreens and bought some here. It's very, when you say you have to take a test to do the check into the hotel. It's a self-administer, right? So
It is.
it's
It
like
is.
this little card, and you take the Q-tip and you do your own nose,
Yeah,
right? So
it's
you know you're not going to get stabbed in the
no,
brain.
you're not.
And then you
It's
put it in the card and twist it, and then
yeah.
so it's
My,
pretty
my wife
easy.
told me it's very similar to a pregnancy test, which obviously I've never done, but it was very enlightening for her to tell me because there's the line.
There
it shows
is the pregnancy
yeah.
test to you is a different part of the body.
Okay, yes, but
Yes.
the lines itself, yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's true. Yeah.
You're using a different part of the body, yes, obviously.
Yes.
But I will say this though, and now I lost my train of thought with that.
I
The
distracted
test
you,
itself,
sorry.
no, it's like a science test. It's like the science class. You have to put the little drops in it.
Yeah.
And that's so it's not hard. It's not something you have to really look at the fine print. They're pretty self-explanatory to the instructions. You wait, I think it's about 15 minutes. I think that when we did it, there's about 15 minutes you wait, and then you get the results right there and then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually quite easy. So if
It is.
anybody hasn't done one, it actually is a piece of cake compared to if you went to a pharmacy and someone gave like administered it to you. The
Yeah, and I just feel the for you to actually be able to do it at home, it's a lot easier than being at the drive-through when they ask you to self-administer and there's 10 cars behind you and you need to get it done right away, right? It's a little bit more at your own pace. And I think it's a good sense of sort of first security, right? I mean, when you travel anywhere and you want to come back and you want to make sure that you're okay and not be able to be around family, you take the test and wait for the results, and then you know that you're okay.
Well, we're almost at time. Is there anything we forgot to talk about or that you've come across having been there for a couple of days that you think it's important for people to know?
No, I think we covered pretty much. I was saying, I think everybody here has this sense of renewal businesses. I mean, everything is open. So there may be some businesses, again, local businesses. So I'm talking about family-owned restaurants that may not be opened the hours that they used to because, let's face it, as tourism is starting to get back, it's not to the 2019 level. So, and one other thing we're seeing here, which is familiar to me in the States and to a lot of people, especially business owners, is that people are having a hard time hiring. So I met with a few hotels earlier today, and the common thread that I learned was that they were having issues hiring because of the same situation back in the States. Everybody's been home. The government has obviously helped out. So, and personally, I mean, as a business, we've suffered that as well. We just hired someone which we're very happy with, but we've had a very difficult time hiring because there's just not a lot of people in the market.
Yeah, just finding candidates has been a challenge.
It is.
Yeah, we
so
hear that as well.
COVID related, or one of the things you may experience is a slight delay in it is European time anyway, but it's
the service takes a little bit longer. You may have to wait.
You may have to wait a little bit longer than what you're used to, but people have a renewed fresh of positivity. I think they have a hop in their step because they think that given the vaccination rates that they're going to have a better coming months and years. Got it.
Well, I think this has been another really informative session. I'm sure we'll have another one in a couple of weeks as things change. For those who joined us live, thank you. If you're watching this post live, hope this is helpful. If you do find it helpful, send us some stars. Believe it or not, it actually is very helpful for us. And subscribe to the PALCUS newsletter, subscribe to Sagres Vacations newsletter. You guys have been such a great resource for us and for the community. We really thank you so much.
We're happy to play a small part. It's been a very strange year, a strange 14 months, but the only thing that we can really count on is communication and just trying to keep people updated as much as possible because things change. That's just the nature of what the life we're living in. But
absolutely.
But I think PALCUS does a great job to communicate that out. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. We're doing our best. All right. Well, until next time, Marco, enjoy your time in Portugal. I'm jealous.
I hear you. Yes.
Cheers. All right.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.